Mike Reese with Saluki Hall of Famer Bob Roop, Saluki wrestler, 1965 to 1969. Congratulations, young man.
Well, thank you, sir.
Welcome to the Hall of Fame. Tell us what it means to you.
Well, it's a special honor because of the fact that I've spent so much time here. I mean, the 6 years or 4 years I spent here were special to me because it was during that time that I developed the expertise to go from being a, not run-of-the-mill, but mainstream wrestler to being an Olympian by having Larry Christoph as someone who being an example, and also I got to work out with him a little bit, but having Coach Wilkinson as my coach, basically being a high school state champion who never had accomplished anything else. I was always close. I tried out in '64 for the Olympics, and I think I took fifth in the tryouts. But to develop as a college wrestler, it happened here at Southern. And it wasn't so much the college style, but Larry Christoph and Coach Wilkinson would encourage me to go to the international style, which is what the National Athletic Club or Union, National AAU, they had every year. They put on a freestyle tournament, national tournament, and a national Greco-Roman tournament. And I went to those from 1966 and 67 and 68, and the last one I went in 1969. And those tournaments, you're wrestling the best wrestlers in the country, and the fact that they're open tournaments, at the lighter weights, there might be, say at 138 or 145, there might be 5 or 6 guys in there that were former national champions or even Olympians or even Olympic champions because it was open to everybody. So when I wrestled against heavyweights, I was wrestling against the best in the country. And that, you know, especially if people are better than you when you start, you try to get better. You know what you're aiming for. So by having the opportunity to do that here, I started at Michigan State, and I'm not knocking Michigan State, but I don't know of any wrestlers, or very few from there, that were encouraged to do AAU wrestling. They wanted them to do the college, to stay in the college.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to go. Yeah, they didn't want to risk them getting hurt, and maybe they didn't want to risk them liking it too much.
So you were in the Army for 3 years.
Yes.
Then you go to Michigan State. Then you come to Southern.
I started at Michigan State.
And then went to the Army.
Yes, I was talking to Larry Christoph earlier this evening. I hadn't seen him in 50 years, but we graduated the same year, 1960. I had a football scholarship to Michigan State, but also I was going to wrestle. I did both sports. A couple of things happened once. One is that we changed coaches. The coaches that recruited me for wrestling, he got kind of a bad deal, and he was replaced as a coach. And the new coach and I didn't hit it off. I mean, I wasn't rebellious or spoiled brat. I wasn't a recruit like a top, All-American, or I had a single state championship, and schools like the Oklahoma schools had guys that were 3 and 4 times state championships and state champions in high school. So it wasn't that I was any special big deal, but I just got fed up and I dropped out of school. My dad was a professor at Michigan State who was working overseas at the time. And when he heard, it took a week, when he heard I dropped my full scholarship, he wasn't pleased. Mm-hmm. But I kind of had a feeling I could get another one. And, what I wanted to do, I thought there was a football player at Michigan State who had been in the Army before he came to state. So he was playing, and he was like a mature guy. Mm-hmm. He had matured. He spent 4 years, and it wasn't even the Army. I think it was the Marines. So I thought maybe I'd like to try that too. I was barely shaving yet. So I thought, I'm just too young for this. I'm going against guys they've reached their full, they've gone through puberty, which I might still be going through. So I dropped out. I spent 3 years in the Army, and at the very end of it, I ran into, at the 1964 Olympic tryouts, I wrestled Larry Christoph. And Larry ended up being he won the Olympic tryouts, so he wrestled in the Olympics that year. Well, he beat me 1-0. So I mean, and I don't know if he had any matches that close. And that I want to make clear, that doesn't mean that he couldn't have beat me worse. Or the way the international style worked, maybe all he had to do was say just draw with me, like have a tie with me, and he'd win the tryout. So for him to come out and like take a risk to try to beat me and maybe make a mistake and get caught and get beat, where he wouldn't be the Olympic tryout, a guy like that would not be as aggressive as he might be like in, say, NCAA style. So, because international is completely different. A lot of, not politics, but a lot of psychology and maneuvering. Some matches you don't need to win. All you need is, sometimes you can lose. You can lose and still be champion. You just can't get pinned. Now that makes sense. That sounds difficult to believe, but that was the style.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting. So Christoph's a friend, he's a colleague, he's a teammate, he's a mentor, and he was a competitor. You're one of your competitors too.
yeah,
That's
I'm not
a
saying
star combination.
he was the guy, and I was telling him this earlier. We haven't stayed in touch. He was coaching. I was at pro wrestling, and afterwards I was Mr. Mom with my kids for years, and then I became a special education teacher, and I retired at doing that, and took care of my wife the last few years of her life, and so I hadn't seen Larry in many years, but I was aware of all of his accomplishments. Larry is 4 or 5 times the wrestler I am, and I have no problem in saying that. But I'll give you an example. I won 1 national championship. Larry won 18. I got inducted into the SIU Hall of Fame in 2022. Larry got inducted into the SIU Hall of Fame in 1978. Hey, I mean, that says it all, right?
Yes, sir.
And you know what? That's the way I wouldn't have been able to do what I did without Larry. Rather than resenting him, I'm grateful to him.
Nice.
I mean, I used to go around. I was the tackling dummy. Coach Wilkerson would take us to a school. They were trying to get a high school wrestling team started. He'd have Larry and me demonstrate, and Larry would just take me and throw me around. And I was like, if I wasn't available, they had this big stuffed dummy you could use. So I was a live dummy, and I could have resented that, but I didn't. I mean, I wanted to be the best. But when you're going against somebody like Larry. And here's the thing: if you have success even once against a guy who's the top third in the world, and you beat him once, what do you say? Because he's not going to let anybody beat him ever. So, and I'm not going to say I beat him once, but maybe.
How about a word on the Olympics at Mexico City in '68? Yes. Did you get the most out of it? Were you happy with your performance? I know you wrestled the gold medalist from the Soviet Union.
That information is incorrect.
It's not?
The guy I wrestled, the Russian I wrestled, was the Greco-Roman. I didn't wrestle Medved. He was a freestyle guy. But the guy I wrestled took second. Okay. And he was 45 years old. He was about 6'6".
45?
Yeah. In foreign countries, the Russian wrestlers, that's what they did. That was their job. They had a place they lived and they trained, and they might have gotten time off during the year to go home. And most of the foreign wrestlers in the World Games, all those people that's what they do. That's their job. Right. And so, sometimes they'll wrestle from the time they're 22 till they're 40 or 45. Now this Russian, because he was Greco-Roman, it's not quite so hard on the body, the knees and the elbows. He was able to wrestle out until he was 50, and he was a world champion 2 or 3 times after I wrestled him. But the guy was obviously going to beat me. They had a style in Greco-Roman, if they just pushed you off the mat 4 or 5 times, you get disqualified, even though they were the ones stalling by pushing you off rather than trying to do something. so I knew this guy was so big, I knew he could push me. After he pushed me off a couple of times, the referee was warning me, if you go one more time, you'll be disqualified. I made a move, and it didn't work. I ended up flat on my back, and I got pinned. But I did my best. And I took 7th in the Olympics. Now, in this country, if you don't win the gold medal, if you aren't in first place, and to prove that, tell me who lost the Super Bowl 3 years ago or 2 years ago.
Not me.
The losers are not remembered, and so maybe in your particular sport. So for years, I didn't say much about it, but I got into scouts, and when my kids were scouting, and our motto was do your best. And I thought back, did you do your best? And I did. I'm not particularly aggressive. I'm not a type A person. I'm not real pushy. And so the fact that I know some wrestlers too, they're just
Sure.
intense. So the fact that I was able to motivate myself to do as well as I did, and again, a lot of gratitude to Larry Christoph, Coach Wilkerson especially. I was able to repay him a little bit. He had retired from coaching, but my second year in pro wrestling, I talked the promoter down there into sponsoring the national AAU Greco-Roman tournament, and they held it down there in Tampa in the same building we did the pro wrestling.
Oh.
And we had a tournament, and I asked Coach to come down and be the tournament chairman, which is a prestigious role, national tournament. And he was perfectly capable. He was a great coach. He had one Olympian in '64. Both his heavyweights were Olympians in 1968. Think about that. The two heavyweights of the United States were both coached by the same coach from this little, as far as a wrestling school, no reputation. And then he had another one, Buck Dietrich, was 220 pounds in 1972. So he had 4 Olympic team members in the upper weights in 3 Olympics. And so that's pretty outstanding. I mean, I know a lot of wrestling coaches, but he was one of the best. So he was a good guy too.
Congratulations on making the Hall of Fame, and thank you very much for the time, Bob.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for putting up with me.
Bob Roop, Saluki Hall of Famer.